panel may recommend to the chief and the board of supervisors revisions to FCPD policies and practices that the panel concludes are needed. And so I think I've told you that we've got a number of recommendations that we've made over the last couple of years, and we'll be taking those up and trying to get them addressed in a more meaningful way at the quarterly meetings. The next thing is it says the panel may conduct public meetings to assist the panel in making recommendations for policy and practice changes to the chief and the board of supervisors. And so that's this issue of public meetings. I know you all debated at some length last meeting, and I know that there were two ideas for potential possible public forums. I want to raise two concerns I have. First of all, Ron already raised the one, and that is that it doesn't seem to me, Ron will try to summon the language, but it doesn't seem to either of us, I think I can say, that there's a great appetite for lots of public forums. I think that's for sure. And the other thing I would point out is that in the short term, between now and say the summer months, where the summer months doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to have a lot of public forums because people are gone. So I know we were hoping to maybe do one in the spring and one in the fall. This spring, we're hoping to do 8 hours of training. We know that we're going to have to finish up the 1827 file. And at the last thing, when I get to new business, I'm going to tell you about a big, thick file that we're going to have to get through for a new complaint that just came in. And if you got the email and you saw, there was a lengthy response from a gentleman who has made a complaint. And so I foresee quite a bit of what I call our primary level work to be done. We have to get trained up. We have a bunch of new members. We haven't got any training. We've got a couple of big complaints. That coupled with what I heard from the board of supervisors caused me to think that maybe we shouldn't try to do any public meetings this spring. We go to the quarterly meeting, get some more feedback about public meetings, gather ourselves over the summer, and then maybe have a public meeting, or maybe even two, if we really feel motivated in the fall. That was my thinking, but I wanted to hear what your thinking is, because it's your panel. So what do you all think about that strategy? Comments, thoughts? Yes?
I think it's necessary for you to take it back and have that discussion in the meeting.
The quarterly meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
and really flesh out more the appetite for us taking that on.
Okay.
I agree with you in terms of the timing. I think we were very enthusiastic at the last meeting, as you can tell by the minutes, who really jumped up. And there's some topics that I think a number of us are passionate about that we'd love to see come to the fore. By the same token, I'm very mindful of the comments that were made at the meeting, and also very mindful of the comment that I made earlier about the chairman's notion that we need to be very deliberate about what we're doing. And so I think with this particular issue, because there are some different perceptions around how this issue is supposed to get shaped up, I think it's important that we take some guidance from the board of supervisors before we jump full steam ahead into it.
That was my thinking too.
Well, I have another thing to add, and that is that our panel is changing. We have new members that are coming on board who are just starting to understand the issues. That's big. But also, the Board of Supervisors is changing in a big way. And the fall is the elections. So I think that my feeling is that we ought to discuss this, flesh this out with the group, but be mindful of the fact that it might be better to delay until after the fall.
Yeah.
Or maybe after November 5th or whatever the election day is, certainly, because I don't want I certainly don't want any of our public forums to become some kind of a political
Yeah.
event at all.
Well, particularly if we did the racial thing, which is important that we figure out a way to address that issue and to, in my view, address the trends that we're seeing. I think that, I'm not saying we run from that at all, but I think that we don't want to be accused of being political.
Great point.
You know, I was thinking the exact same thing about waiting until after the election, simply because I knew that, you know, we know that there is going to be this change. The other thing is, for me, I think right now the most important thing for me is training. You know, to get training and to do a forum in the spring. There's just no time to do it because I think there's a, you know, just my understanding, there's a lot of work involved in that. And so after the election, if we're going to do it at all this year, I think would be a better time to do it. But I just think we don't want to step into that.
I'm obviously the new guy, but just to play devil's advocate for a second, most people around the county are not as focused on county politics or county happenings or county anything comparatively to the issues that they often focus on, especially here, because we're, you know, right across the river from Congress and everything. So I wonder if there's a way that, say, a public forum that opens our group up to the public in a good way, say in September, when people are focusing on the elections coming up, when they are focusing on what might happen with the Board of Supervisors, could actually be beneficial to essentially getting the word out about the panel, to improving the public trust by letting more people know that there is a panel that addresses civilian complaints. And, you know, I know that this is a happy dance, and I wouldn't want it to be, you know, on the eve of the election, but I'm not, I think there is a counter argument on the other side.
Yeah, I think so too. So if it's okay, unless anybody has other comments, my thought is we're going to get some input, hopefully at that quarterly meeting. Holly and I will report back to you all at the next meeting, and we can, and people can be thinking about it. You know, the other thing too is that depending on what kind of public forum we have, maybe we can take on, maybe we can, in the past we've done more of just informational meetings, and my sense was that we've been there, done that. That was definitely what I heard her say. You've done enough of those. You've gotten, you know, so maybe there isn't a need for that, or maybe there won't be an appetite for that. I just don't know. I could be wrong, and I could certainly, if the panels, you know, if the consensus is that we should have a panel in September, then we'll consider it, and we'll keep talking about it, and you can be thinking about different topics that you think. I think we might need to have a topic
Right.
this time rather than just a high, you know. I'm Doug Cam, the chair of the panel. We've done several of those already.
Well, we did talk about topics.
We did.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for this 12th meeting, it would be helpful, I think, to mention what the panel has said. That
Yeah.
there are two topics that I heard last time that were focused on. One was the racial discrimination issue and the trends that we're seeing. And that would take an awful lot to prepare for that, you know, discussion. We couldn't just throw that together overnight. And then the other one was the mental health issue. Is that right? So do you want us to talk about those, just throw those out to the board?
I think you should.
Yes.
That was what I would think.
The next topic is panel training. And from our bylaws, the bylaws say that all panel members shall complete all training mandated by the Board of Supervisors, which may include police ride-alongs. The panel shall determine the calendar for the presentation and completion of required training. The panel shall conduct other training as it determines will be helpful. That's what it says in our bylaws. I don't recall being mandated by the board to do any particular training ever. I'm not sure they know that our bylaws say that. Historically, though, just to catch everybody up, when we first stood the panel up and we didn't really have any other business to do, we spent a lot of time doing training. I think we had at least 2 8-hour sessions, or it seems to me.
Three sessions, and they were half-day sessions.
Yeah.
And the highlight was, you all didn't get the, maybe some of you already know Gene Sensman, but Gene Sensman comes up to about my elbow, and we had a huge screen, and they were they were using the same software device that the police use to try to figure out, when to use deadly force. And she volunteered to be one of the people with the gun in her pocket. She had this big holster on, and she's standing right there, and the screen's here, and this guy, basically, she shot the wrong person, and it was got stabbed 6 times. It was crazy, but it was I definitely remember that very well. I'd love to get that training. I want my turn, with the quick draw. But we did get some excellent training early on. As I say, the senior, by seniority, Hill members did. And there's a number of you that haven't benefited very much training or any training at all, and I think that's a shame. So there's an organization called NACOLE, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody here is a member,
Yes,
a card-carrying member of NACOLE by virtue of the fact that of our membership on the panel. What does NACOLE stand for? National Association of...
Of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement.
Okay, thank you. And it's a nonprofit. Where is it? Is it sit in Ohio or some such place in the Midwest?
I
Chicago?
don't know.
I think it's actually in Arizona.
Yeah.
That's their home base.
It sounded more like
They only have, I think, 3 full-time employees. Everybody else is kind of an honorary member or a non-paid member.
So we, Holly and Michelle, and I guess Richard was on the phone, and Gentry, we had a call with the NACOLE folks. They do training. They come around, they take their show on the road, and they've recently been to Charlottesville, Virginia, and provided them with some training. They've been to other jurisdictions and have panels and provide training. And they have a number of courses that they've taught and they've experienced teaching, and that's why you saw the publication of some different options that they put together for us. And you all participated, hopefully, in the survey monkey. Yes, sir. And the county has money. It's not free. The county has money set aside for us to get trained. And we have enough money in our leftover to hire NACOLE. The county's budget goes on I think July 1st fiscal year. July 1 or fiscal
July
year.
1.
So it's a little bit of an odd fiscal year. So if we want to do training, we want to get it, we've got the money, we can spend it, but we need to do the training like in May or June. Just to give you my way of background, the classes, what they say, sounds really good, but they'll bring their people to us. We can have our training here, we've had it in the past, or some other such place like this. They can come in, they can give us training. They can give us 4 hours of training, they can give us 8 hours of training. They can give us 4 hours of training one afternoon, and then the other 4 the next morning, if people don't think they can sit still for 8 hours and take 8 hours of training. And so you all have answered the survey, and so I wanted to open it up to the panel and ask you all if the NACOLE idea makes sense to you all. It sounds good first. Some head nods, okay?
Yes.
All right. And look, it doesn't mean we can't get other additional training from the police department, but some of these classes sound really, really good to me, so I'm glad you all are enthusiastic.
Like Rochelle said, as a group, the highest number of responses on any given day was only 5. And just a point of clarification, it's obviously county money, but it's part of the auditor's budget, and we've discussed it. I mean, unless maybe minimum 7 people are available.
No, that's right.
I'm not sure if it's worth doing for only 5, which is the number one number right now.
Yeah, well, I agree with that 100%. The next item on the agenda is outreach representative. So in the past, we've had various people, particularly Steve Visconti, serve as somebody who was heavily engaged in sort of panel outreach. And so the thought was that maybe we would try to get a volunteer or two to sort of spearhead that effort on behalf of the panel. And really what that would involve would be, I think, working with the auditor's office because you all get invitations, right? People want, isn't it really usually a service to you all, or not?
It has, although Steve was a little more proactive reaching out. But we do, for example, we got one just the other day that Holly and I are going to attend in June, I believe, from a civic association, which came through the office. But again, Steve was more proactive, reaching out and offering for outreach events.
Does anybody have any interest in spearheading that effort? I think up again in May, we'll see if we can get some more interest. I'll try to get a better job description about that.
I think that's
That would help.
Yeah, I can tell. Maybe I'll try to ask Steve exactly what he did and get his list of contacts.
He went around and met with a lot of civic organizations on his own time. And he reached out by telephone and called people and went out and visited them and then arranged to have more formal presentations.
And then last year, Gentry did help me with, after Steve was not on panel, even before it was on, before he left. Gentry helped to do a lot of the legwork in terms of contacting the other groups, because Steve had a very active list of community organizations. Remember, we spent that time pulling it together. So she would do some outreach to the groups as well, see if they were interested. So she was giving a lot of support, especially in the realm of nonprofit organizations. The civic associations, like Richard, they seem to seek you out, but some of the other nonprofits in the community, there was more work there to actually.
It's not a huge issue, but it's an issue that I wanted to raise with the panel. So Austin raises a number of complaints. Some of them, the alleged bad conduct happened more than a year before he made his complaint. Some of them were within the year. Some of the complaints were within the year. But the principal complaints are more than a year from the date. And our bylaws are pretty strict, and it says a complaint that is more than a year old, when you complain about activity, it can't be more than a year old. But there is in parentheses, unless the panel determines that there's good cause for the delay, is what our bylaws say. So it so happened, his complaint is complicated by the fact that he alleges that he was unlawfully arrested in the city. And then he was criminally prosecuted for about a year. It took about a year for that to all happen. And actually more than a year, it took more like 15 months. And then within about 20 days of the conclusion of the criminal prosecution is when he made his complaint. If he had made his complaint during the pendency of the criminal prosecution, we would have told him, we can't handle your complaint because if there's pending litigation, we can't handle it. We would have sent a letter back and said, let us know when your litigation is over and we'll take up your complaint then. So it's a fairly nuanced, complicated fact pattern. Holly and I have discussed this, and I want to be sure to see if you all agree with our logic. We have a procedure in place where we have panel liaisons in place in this one. It so happens that the panel liaisons are Bob and Holly. And when the complaint then comes in, a subcommittee is formed. The third person in the subcommittee is either the vice chair or the chair. So I think I'm stuck being on the subcommittee for this initial disposition, right? So that there will be, I anticipate there will be a subcommittee of 3 of us that will make a initial determination as to whether or not the panel has authority. Sometimes we call that jurisdiction. We're not being precise with our words. To review the complaint, okay? And so there's always this initial review that's done under our procedures that Rhonda instituted this month. But typically we're focused on whether or not we think that the allegations in the four corners of the complaint state a claim that there's been serious misconduct within the 4 corners of the complaint. That's principally what we look at. But it's when you actually look at what that subcommittee is supposed to do, they're supposed to determine whether there's authority for the, and one of the things that you have to determine for authority is whether it's timely. So I'll give you all that. Obviously, put a lot of thought into this. One of the things that there is no provision for in the bylaws, and Rhonda and I could not have foreseen that this, we tried to foresee everything we did. And the issue is with regard to good cause for the delay, we think that it would be appropriate to invite Mr. Austin to provide us, if he wants to, with any information as to what his good cause is for his delay. Now,
Well,
please, because I need to be the principal architect of the procedure, so.
I have a couple of thoughts on it. First of all, I think that there is somewhere in all the paper we put together, there are some guidelines for the liaisons about what exactly they're supposed to do in that role.
Mhm.
And part of what they're supposed to do is be able to contact the complainant. So I think it's perfectly appropriate that if you have some questions or you think that that would add to your deliberations on whether or not we have authority to review the investigation, to call them and say, why did you wait so long? I mean, it's just a question you can certainly ask. Or you could, as you suggested, invite them to come to the meeting and tell you. It doesn't have to be determinative. It's just a piece of information that you would use in deciding whether or not the subcommittee decided whether or not the panel has authority to review.
You know, some of the resident of Maryland, which may be one reason why he wasn't familiar with procedures.
I have a
That's
question.
what I would say.
It is kind of a follow-up to what Shirley was asking. How long after the prosecution ended did he file the complaint?
Oh, it was very soon
I
after.
can tell you exactly.
Then I have to agree with Shirley that if he wasn't eligible to file it because of our rules about you can't file if you're involved in litigation, as soon as that process ended, he filed it in a very timely manner.
Our rules don't say that he can't file.
Right.
They only say that
But we can't review.
We
Yeah,
can't review.
so had he filed it while the criminal case is pending, we would have sent him a letter back that's very perfunctory that would say, and it's in our procedure binder. Let us know when it's over. One of the things that I didn't think about when we wrote that, Rhonda, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that, is what if people's litigation takes more than a year? then is there a complaint then untimely when they renew it? I don't think so. I don't think any of us would say that.
Yeah.
I'd have to say no. At least maybe they've told it by making, let's use legal terms. I know that Julia would prefer that we get it in writing as opposed to, because one of the things we have to be mindful of is we're not collecting any evidence, right? That's not our role. So.
And not having two meetings where the complainant comes to answer questions about one issue and then questions can't get in. Say that you could have him come solely to address.
Well, so there's a, what she's Julia speaking to is, go ahead.
I would just also counter that and just say, be mindful that you're imposing a burden on him to do something that you don't have to do to submit a complaint. Because we take complaints over the phone.
No, I understand.
Somebody can call up and dictate to Richard or someone what their situation is.
But what I'm trying to do is give this guy an opportunity to explain the good cause for the delay. I'm not trying to impose the burden. I'm trying to give him, an additional opportunity to be sure that his complaint is actually ultimately heard by us.
Go ahead.
My only thought is that he gets to do that in a number of different ways, that we're not imposing so much of a burden on him that we don't get the kind of response or get a response that you might be looking for. Because at some point, someone else could see this as a barrier to them being able to get an investigation with you. So requiring it in writing, all of those things are barriers to getting information, at least in my opinion.
We may want to consider at some point, maybe now, maybe later, whether or not we want to amend the bylaws. I don't know if it requires an action item, that is to basically toll the time of the litigation. Because it seems fair to me, if someone's in litigation, criminal litigation, that they have an obligation to file even though we would say no. That just seems like it's not logical.
Having been a
Yes,
defense
I
attorney,
agree.
sure, would you recommend your client write something like that to this body while you're representing a defendant?
No, absolutely not.
Right, so it's inadvisable, and probably, I would say, 99 lawyers out of 100 would tell their client not to do that.
So we might want to amend we might want to ask the board in one of our little meetings, say, this is one of the things we didn't think about. I'm sure you didn't think about it, but maybe we ought to.
I'll start a list right now.
Yes.
Any other new business?
Doug, I just
Yes.
want to mention one thing. We found out earlier today, based on a motion that Chairman Bulba made at a board meeting in February, during the presentations portion of the June 4th Board of Supervisors meeting, the board is going to recognize Randy Sales and Adrian Steele's service both on the panel and prior to that on the ad hoc commission, because as we know, neither one of them is currently on the panel moving forward, but there's going to be a recognition of their service, and Gentry is trying to coordinate a very small reception prior to the board meeting, and obviously everybody on the panel will be invited to
Can you
that.
give me that date again?
Yeah, June the 4th, Tuesday, the meeting will begin at 9:30. So I would anticipate the reception possibly being 8:30.
AM.
Yes.
Just want to be clear. All right, any other new business? Richard, thank you for that.
Yeah.
We'll try to make it. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any, all those in favor?